Hey guys, Chris here again with Bluewater Cruising. Welcome to another episode of the Bluewater Cruising podcast. I am here today with Jack and Amy, and I'm excited for this one. It's been a while since we've done one. I'm sitting on a boat in the Bahamas, effectively, Exumas, and you guys are super close by, but we haven't been able to meet. We're still over the internet to do this, which is rad. And yeah, excited to have you guys on board. I've known you guys for over a year now, I guess. You were in one of our early programs. Now you're hosts of our Blue Water Cruising Adventures program, and providing amazing experiences for aspiring cruisers that want to get a sense of what it's like before they get out there. So lots to talk about, but I suppose if you want to maybe introduce yourselves to begin with and give a bit of a background on why you're here, like who you guys are and how you came to be living on a sailboat, doing what a lot of the living, not even just living and cruising a sailboat, which the majority of the world would call you crazy. I don't, and I think the people watching don't, but yeah, hand it over to you guys. Many people have.
Yeah. Well, we started about 3 years ago or so. We had traveled a lot during COVID. We had a little RV and went out west, and we just really enjoyed traveling. And we were getting to the point where we were going to be empty nesters, and we were thinking about downsizing at some point. And we actually took a trip up to Wisconsin. We were from Chicago most recently. We took a trip up to Wisconsin and up on Lake Michigan. We talked to a woman who was at a very large cabin cruiser, and just started talking to her about it. And she said it was her parents, and they lived on it seasonally and just cruised around Lake Michigan all summer, basically. And I had been kind of pushing Jack as maybe a later in retirement thought that we would live on like a floating home like they have in Europe. And I think Portland has some communities, but he wasn't interested. He's like, I have no reason to downsize so much just to be tied to a dock somewhere. And then
I'd like to, so a little bit about Amy was a sign language interpreter for her career. I was an automotive guy, so had nothing to do with the sailing world. I grew up in San Diego and sailed a little bit 30 years ago. And sort of to the point she just made, she had been, hey, look at this little tiny floating house. Look at this little barge floating house. Isn't this great? And wouldn't you like to live on one? And I was, no, not doing it.
Dead set against it.
No. I'm not living on something smaller than our current garage, not doing it. And then as Amy commented, we met this very nice woman and talked about her parents, and they were in Wisconsin. They call them snowbirds. They were in Arizona in the summer, and then they cruise in the winter, and then they cruise in the summer. And after that conversation, I just turned to her and I said, if it'll go someplace, I'm in. That's all I said.
Uh-huh.
And then 2 days later, it was then announced to me that we were going to be buying a catamaran. And then the journey started.
So it was primarily Amy. It was your idea.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. This was, everybody thinks the guy is the one with living the dream, and this was absolutely not the case in our situation. This was Amy was absolutely the driver of this program. But,
cool.
Happy wife, happy life, all that kind of stuff. And I'm up for it. We'd done the RV traveling, like she said, and some new adventure. And sort of as more pointed to your question, Chris, on why we're here. So in 2019, I was diagnosed with stage 4 kidney cancer. In August of 2019, I was basically told I had less than 90 days to live. Clearly, they were wrong, and I wasn't interested in being done. And that was part of the very strong motivation to what kind of life do we want to have? Do we want to just stay in Illinois where we were living and, had a house too big for us since the kids were all out? And that was a lot of my motivation to go ahead and go along with her dream. And it was because I just didn't want to sit around doing nothing in retirement. And there was way more to life than, doing what we were doing. And having been that close to, death, it really changed my perspective and my outlook on what kind of life did I want to have with her. And that was sort of how that whole process really got going. Yeah.
Cool. It started, I've heard this before, and I've heard your story around this before too. And it's this, I kind of break the idea of going cruising down into kind of 2 stages, where stage 1 is people tend to come to this place in their life where they want to change. And that's kind of the first stage. And generally something happens. I think humans typically don't change unless they run into some sort of a wall. we
Right.
get quite comfortable living our lives, and you hit a big one.
Right.
You know, and so it sounds to me like, you know, there's this desire to change, and then the vehicle for change is cruising. That was the vehicle but it's motivated by, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's motivated by a way you wanted to live differently. You know, you wanted a different experience of life than you'd had of to date. And
Absolutely.
okay, and then
I
and
wanted to
what
live, Chris. That was the thing. I wanted to live. I wanted to go
I
out
like
and
that.
live and experience life and the people and all the things that come with that cruising can provide you, other than staying at home, you know, playing with the dogs, working on cars, because I was a car guy my whole life, and we were very
Mm.
comfortable. We didn't have, very comfortable with where we were, but I wanted to have more out of life. She wanted more out of life, and I, tried to make my wife happy, and she wanted to go down this road. So I'm like, okay, let's go. But it was clearly the will and the desire to have a bigger, broader, more life,
Fuller
to
life. Yeah.
fuller life,
Which
very succinctly.
would you say, like, and the reason I ask this is I've heard some people tell me this before, because I've got a similar story like a lot of people, you know, but I would say for me, I was unhappy before, you know. And would you say that you guys were unhappy, or was it more of just a kind of
Um,
a, how would you describe the sense of the state that you were in the state that you were in before you made the change? You say you wanted to live. What were you doing before living?
I would say, to complacent would be a reasonable term. I was retired by that from my health, and then I was at the age where I could retire early, and my health facilitated that. Amy was happily working as a sign language interpreter. COVID hit, which was part of this whole process, but we were just doing our thing day to day, and we were complacent. Would you agree?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've heard, and I think it was in the trainings, we were actually in the first class, so it was over 2 years ago. But I've heard a lot of people say, like, usually they get to a point where they're unhappy with their life. They're frustrated. You know, Keith was burnt out from work, or they were frustrated with just things in general and just sort of wanted to escape. We were definitely not in that camp at all. My career's going fantastic. I was very well established, had lots of work, and it was very gratifying. Jack ended up retiring early after he got through his cancer treatments and was dealing with side effects. And then COVID hit, and it was just a period of trying to figure out what he wanted to do for the next stage of his life, basically. But we had built our dream home. We were very comfortable. And it would have been easy to stay, but I had the opportunity to travel a lot. I got to interpret some cruises and go, to countries that I'd never been to. And I was very frustrated with that experience, because you would just go into shore, not meet any locals other than if they were serving you drinks or something. And it was hard to get away from, whatever port you were at to go explore, because you only had like 8 hours or whatever. And then you had to be back on board. And if you aren't, the ship's going to leave without you. And I started thinking about, like, what if you could travel around and just take everything with you, just live on a boat and just go place to place. And, when I thought about that on the bigger picture, the thought of crossing oceans just scared the heck out of me. I had no experience with sailboats at all. I had been on power boats off of New England as a kid. My uncles always had boats and stuff. But it was a very limited experience. And Jack had sailed, and he did a charter boat in the BVIs in the early 90s when he got his ASA certifications. And I had always pestered him to kind of recreate that trip and do that with some of his guy friends. So every time a big birthday came up, I'd be like, let's set that up as like the big birthday trip, because they're all about the same age, but a couple of them get seasick and nobody else knows how to sail. And so it just kind of never happened. And, with Jack getting to the point because of his cancer that he was starting a different stage in his life a little sooner than he expected, and having this attitude shift of like, life is precious. I don't have time to waste, and you can't take it for granted. So those two things kind of happened to merge together. And then, like I said, we got to travel with the RV and enjoyed it. We realized we didn't need most of what we had. We were gone for a month at a time in a 15-foot RV with the 2 dogs.
Huh.
And I didn't miss like anything, you know? So we realized that we could live like literally on top of each other if we had to. We didn't want to do that, which is why we got a catamaran, not a
Right.
monohull.
Right.
But I was like, we don't need this stuff, you know?
Yeah.
So, and I wanted the experiences more.
Yeah.
Yep.
Experiences over things.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people, I think, listening to this would maybe think that the sound of it is you guys have worked hard in your life. You know, you created this life, you had your dream home, you're living in all this, and you're going to give it all up to do something you know really nothing about, other than you met some lady in the bay somewhere and then had this idea, what if it moves? And like, okay, we're going to get a catamaran. Did you think that it was risky?
No,
Little bit.
I mean, a little
bit.
bit. I was worried that we would really regret giving up our house because we knew we would not get that back, obviously. But we needed to financially to get the level of boat that we were looking for. You know, pretty much everybody we told that we were going to do this said we were crazy. But they also told Jack that when he went to China in 2007. Like, I was one of very few people who said, wow, that sounds awesome. Go to China for a month, get the experience. So, you know, I took it with a grain of salt when other people are like, it's just too dangerous. But, you know, I looked into it, and there's so few incidences, especially since like 1990, of people being like really shipwrecked and lost at sea and things like that with the technology and the weather prediction that we have now. We figured our first year we'd do mostly coastal cruising anyway, which we did. So we're not far from help if we need it. We got from St. Martin back to Florida, got everything loaded up, got back to the Bahamas for a little while last year. And then we decided to go north, and we made it all the way up to Canada. And now
Cold.
we're back down in the Bahamas.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Cold Canada.
Chris,
It was great though. It was beautiful.
to answer your point or your question more for me,
Yeah.
it was never, you know, a fear issue. You know, I was more afraid, literally more afraid of wasting the remainder of my life doing nothing. And I don't mean that, you know, some people are fine staying at home and, you know, staying around their family. That's all well and good for them. But for me, I was much more concerned about the time that life provided me remaining. Hopefully I'll be here till 100, but you know, you never know when the bus is coming. And I was much more concerned about wasting the time I had ahead of me, being complacent. That, you know, like Amy said, I went to China for 5 weeks in a language immersion program in my 40s. Everybody thought I was crazy, but I'm a bit of an adventurer. She's of an adventurer. So the fear was more about wasting the remaining life that I had in front of me, if that makes sense.
Absolutely makes sense to me. And that's why you did it. I think a lot of people and I think that's that perspective again. That's why I think that people don't necessarily make this change until they confront something like that, you know, until they're able to be like, oh my God, I'm going to do the same thing for the rest of my life. That's scarier than doing something I've never done before.
Right.
You know, like,
You know,
yeah.
I was told, and it was, you know, it was a very pivotal moment when my doctor basically said, you know, don't expect to see Thanksgiving, which was less than 90 days away. And that was scary.
Yeah.
That was scary.
Yeah.
But you know what? I'm still here. We're still here. And like I said, it was more scary. The prospect of staying comfortably in our house, you know, which we did work hard for, but I wanted to do something with that work, and you know, getting out on this boat, having this adventure was what we decided to do. You know, I was too old to climb Mount Everest, so we decided to do this instead. So
Cool.
But to your point, it has been great, and there's also challenges. You know, it's not the dream everybody, a lot of YouTubers put it out to be.
I'd like to get into that because I think, I mean, from what you guys said, you know, you had this idea as a result of having this hitting this stage of your life and getting cancer and really realizing your mortality, I suppose, is what it is in a lot of ways. I think a lot of people think they're going to live forever until it hits them in the face that they're not.
Right.
And
one thing real quick too, Jack had stage 4 cancer and had pretty much no symptoms. They found
wild.
it on a fluke. He got a chest x-ray when he went in for his annual checkup because he had a little bit of like a tickle cough that wasn't going away. he found out he had walking pneumonia, which was gone like 3 days later with a Z-Pack. But they noticed that his lymph nodes were really swollen in his chest. And they said, it looks like it could be cancer. And it ended up that it had already metastasized. So we're even lucky that they caught it. But it's not, he was in his 50s and 100% healthy as far as we knew, so he wasn't on medication for anything, didn't have any chronic conditions, he was working full-time plus and just going about life.
What would you say? I mean, I know there's the whole like you went cruising, which is a massive thing, change. But what would you say, like as far as you talk about perspective, right, and the way you see the world, what would you say is like the biggest shift that caused in your life, the way you see the world and the way you see life?
Wow, that's that it's that whole seize the day. There's so much out in the world, and for whatever avenue or vehicle will work for some whatever person, sitting at home generally isn't it. At least it wasn't for us, and we've gotten so many different perspectives. Our marriage is better. We've grown as a couple. We've grown individually quite a bit. Matter of fact, one of the biggest things I learned, and to Bluewater's credit, you've talked a fair amount about the psychology of this.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest thing that I've had to learn, because this was not my plan, not my idea. I struggle being on board sometimes more than Amy does with boredom and isolation from people. I was really forced to take a close look at who I am and what's my value system. Not just in our marriage and, I love her and all that kind of stuff, but what makes me tick, what's important to me, what keeps me up, what keeps me motivated. Part of the reason we're doing these adventures, and I don't mean to sound trite about it, but, I want to help other people to sort of, if this is for them, I want to help them facilitate that growth or that path. And if it's also not for them, I would also like to help them figure that out as well, because it's not for everyone. It's not for everyone. But a lot of people that not quite sure they can do it. This is a doable thing. This really is a doable thing. We did it on the fast track. Other people have, as you well know, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year plans, and whatever works for your individual situation is your individual situation. But this is absolutely doable. And we do it with 2 dogs. So we've compounded our challenges even more.
That's harder than kids.
It is harder than kids.
It is harder than kids. It is.
But that's I guess the biggest thing is that if you really work at it and you get some support and you have a network of support, which Bluewater absolutely provides, this is a doable thing and it can be amazing. There are amazing moments. There are moments where I'm like, Amy, get me off of this thing. I'm done. As a matter of fact, we've had a couple of those moments. But overall, and the point about giving it a year, once I got over the year hump, I'm much more comfortable with it. I'm much more satisfied with doing this for a while. But I guess for myself, Chris, personal introspective growth was the biggest thing, that was the biggest challenge and also the biggest benefit for me, which then facilitated us as a couple.
He saw himself as much more of an introvert, but he didn't realize how much daily interaction he was having with other people. And we've really been on this very full time compared to a lot of people. A lot of people will put it on the hard for a few months during hurricane season and go tour around on land or stay in an Airbnb to get a break. I'm fine with being on the boat 24/7, 365, basically, other than going to visit friends or family. He is getting to the point where he wants more of a break.
You like to get off.
Yeah, just to take like an unlimited hot shower or not have to worry about, different things that, the hassles, like Jack calls it, the inconveniences of being on a boat, just provisioning. He's like, I just want to have a car and go to Costco and do a huge run and just, bring it straight inside, not be back and forth in the dinghy or whatever we have to do. So, but I think it's changed. His cancer changed my perspective a lot, in that I had always said, and I'm a little younger than him, so I'm not as close to retirement as he was. But, I always thought, when I retire, I want to travel more. I want to have more free time to, knit and crochet and read and maybe learn ukulele and stuff like that, learn Spanish. And, we would have just carried on the same path, working 50 or 60 hours a week, just chasing the dollar. And like I said, we're happy and satisfied in our careers, but you can't assume that you're going to, even even live to 65 to retire and have plenty of healthy time afterwards. You just never know. So I figured, work it in, do that now. Luckily we had established ourselves well enough that, I could work part-time. Jack could retire early if he wanted to, or at this point, he's recovered enough from the side effects that he could probably work part-time. But just to have more balance, and then hopefully we live to be 100 and we're healthy and happy, and we can look back on many years of experiences instead of, a confined, 5 years after retiring where we actively traveled or whatever. So just to have a better balance, I think.
Yeah. So it sounds like in kind of both of your cases, it was this life event of facing death. It caused you to look at yourselves, really, and reevaluate your priorities and what mattered to you. And Jack, I heard, I think from you too, like to appreciate the day, the little things, just of like, hey, I'm alive.
Yeah.
Like that's the basics of which we can take, very much take for granted.
I get to see the sunset today, and it's not insignificant.
No, and you're doing one of the best things in the world to be able to appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
The sunrise and the sunset. There's almost no better place you can be to appreciate the daily sunrise and sunset than sitting on a boat.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
Chris, there is absolutely. While we were traveling in the RV, we went and saw, Yellowstone in Montana and some of the western states, and I'd been around a lot of the country, and it's beautiful. The United States is fantastic. I've been to the Great Wall in China. I've seen some wonderful things, but there's no question that there are things that you cannot do or see unless you're living on a boat, and some of them are spectacular. I mean, just spectacular. Amy commented we went to Canada. Well, what we did was we went up and did sort of the U.S. historical tour. We stopped at Fort Sumter, we stopped at Yorktown, we stopped in Boston and Jamestown. So we saw this historical things that as an American was really cool for us. We went to the Annapolis boat show, and Amy found a shuttle bus that took us into DC. So we went and saw DC for a week. When we went to Canada, and yes, my friend, Canadians are some of the nicest people you will ever meet. We met this young guy, and literally within 15 minutes of talking with him, he gave us the keys to his truck.
Well, first he gave us a ride.
First he picked us up on the side of the road. We were running on our scooters to go get some lunch and some small provisioning. Wasn't sure if we had enough range to get where we wanted to go, so he offered us a ride. Literally showed us he and his family were the largest lobstering family on Grand Manan Island in New Brunswick, so we got to tour that. Literally, we knew this guy 15 or 20 minutes, and he gave us the key to his company truck. Have at it. Just park it back at the marina where we were, the dinghy dock. And then the next morning, he and his wife and daughter came in on these big Sea-Doos, picked us up, and we literally went 20 miles offshore out into the open ocean looking for what is commonly known as Old Tom the killer whale. And we found him. We got video to prove it that we were out jet skiing on the open ocean with this killer whale and a pod of dolphins this guy runs with. And I'm sorry, you cannot do that from home in conventional United States. It just is not going to happen. And we met some fantastic people, great experiences, and that's the worth it part of it. That the absolute and the lifelong memories. We've made some lifelong friends. Jeff and Valerie, my first passage was with Jeff and Valerie. Had a hell of a time with them, but Jeff and Valerie are my dear friends. They're our dear friends, and Jeff is my captain. Just from Puerto Rico to Florida with the two of them and our first trip out, right? And actually, as part of the reason, seriously, I want to give Bluewater a bit of a plug here. I'll be honest, I was very cynical about Bluewater at first, but Jeff and Valerie were involved, and we would ask, and they're doing this, and they're doing this, and they're doing this, and you guys have really got a really great program. And the Bluewater adventure thing is great. We candidly wish we'd had that opportunity previously, but I did my passage with Jeff and Valerie. Amy did a passage 1,000 miles with some friends. So we got sort of a taste of that. Mm-hmm. No, and that's part of this whole experience for us. And for me is to take the life experience and this sailing experience and try to help others move along their path with it.
To give back.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. Give back.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you. We have come a long way, and you guys have come a long way too, it sounds like. So we're all growing. We're all growing together on the same journey. our different journeys on the similar paths. You've talked a lot about like some of the highlights, swimming with the killer whale, and I guess some of the low spots too. You know, being diagnosed with cancer is definitely a low spot, I would say. You've turned it into a high, I think, which is super inspiring and incredible. Like, all cruising aside, I think the way you've gone through that and what you've done with your life since there is inspiring to anybody, regardless of what they want to do. What are some of the challenges you faced in making this shift? You know, pardon the pun, turning the boat around. You know, it was going in one, because it's a big shift. You know, I say it a lot. I'm like, you changed literally every aspect of your life to go and do this and live in a different way, and that's not easy. So yeah, if you want to share maybe a couple of them, some of them, if there's anything that comes to mind.
So I think there's a few things. So there's definitely lessons we've learned the hard way, and you can learn from other people's mistakes, which is better than making that mistake yourself. But there's so many mistakes that can be made. You can't learn everything ahead of time. So you will make a lot of mistakes. Yep. Like even going north last season, like you said, cold, had the pros and cons. We got to see all the Revolutionary and Civil War stuff. We got to stop at all these little coastal towns that weren't tourist destinations by any means or anything, but it was great to like stop into a restaurant or meet people and just kind of, you know, see the town. But we were cold a lot of last year. We were also very isolated a lot of last year because most people don't go cruising north. So a lot of times we might stop in, there might be one or two other boats, but there was no cruiser's net. You know, people didn't necessarily pop over to each other's boats to just say hi and meet them. We did make some great friends in Yorktown who came over because they have the same Leopard 48 that we have, and they wanted to see what we had done or what the previous owner had done, and actually ended up making really great friends with that family. But we learned that we do need to socialize more. We do like to be in the warmer climates, things like that. When we were going up through Maine, I'd say from about Boston north, it was a nightmare of crab and lobster pots. Buoys just everywhere. And the further north we went, the more concentrated they got. We picked up a line leaving an anchorage in Maine, and Jack had to dive in, I don't know how cold the water was.
It was cold.
But had to dive to get the line off the prop, because even though we have line cutters, it didn't completely.
Too thick. Yeah.
Got the rope, it was too thick.
Yep.
And then
did you have a wetsuit?
Yeah, it was still cold.
Not warm
still
enough.
Cold.
Not a heavy duty wetsuit.
Not a thick one, just a little tropical doodad. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cold.
And then when we were coming up by Acadia Park in Maine, we were coming in. It's basically like I was calling it a fjord. I don't know if it technically qualifies, but it just went straight up from the water, like up the side of a mountain on both sides. And I didn't realize that my reception was spotty. So my chart plotter wasn't updating our location exactly correctly. And I ended up turning and running the port keel over a rock that was just like 5 or 6 feet underwater. So we barely hit it, but we were right at high tide and we got stuck. So we were going to call for
we didn't barely hit it. I was asleep and was
woke you up.
And we ran aground on that. One hole was aground.
Yeah. So Jack managed to get us off by like heavily throttling the engines back and forth, but unfortunately that split off the bottom part of our rudder.
Yeah.
So we were okay. The boat, there was no, damage to the hull or anything. We were able, actually, when we got up to Canada, we were able to get it hauled out very inexpensively so that we can check out the
Good old
damage.
Canadians.
Do a good bottom cleaning. Yeah, it was great. So we did that, and then we decided on our way back down in October, when we got hauled out to do bottom paint and stuff, that we would get the repairs done in Virginia then. But we got stuck. The boatyard kind of got backburnered. They were juggling some other boatyards and kind of got overwhelmed a little. We ended up spending about 8 weeks there when we should have been there about 4 weeks. So then we were leaving in January, and we had snow, we had ice. It was miserable.
And on top of 8 weeks in the boatyard.
Yeah.
There,
And
there's
we were
something,
living in the boat with the dogs too.
there's something inherently wrong when you're on a catamaran and there are icicles coming off your boom. It's just
Yeah.
something that's wrong. Just wrong.
Yikes, yikes. Well, they
But
say
we made
there's
great friends in the boatyard, and we've been down here in the Bahamas with them and spent some time with them. So,
Right.
so everything has the upside too.
Yep.
they say there's two types of sailors, right? Those that have run aground and those that lie about it. So,
Exactly.
yeah,
Chris,
I
there
drove.
was an old guy. There was an old guy in the boatyard where we had the haul out, and he could see Amy was very sad and sort of had this dejected look. And he, the only people that haven't hit the bottom are liars or anybody that hasn't been anywhere. Just and he made her feel better, but it was nice. But right,
It's very true. I drove our boat into a reef, so I think everybody I know has driven a boat aground in some way or another. So they're hardy beasts, so they survive.
they are.
Yes.
But something that really helped us with that experience, and we joke about it, and we tell other people that this is sort of just our conclusion that there really are only 4 real problems on a boat. Emergencies, right? Serious water coming in, because if you get a little bit of water coming in, no big deal. Your
Big deal.
boat's pumping in.
Yeah.
A fire, okay, that's a real
Yeah.
problem on a catamaran. In our case, the dogs or somebody going in the water while you're underway, right? A man overboard, or some type of a medical evac where a heart attack, or somebody was on the radio looking for help because somebody had a stroke recently. Something like that. Even getting hit by lightning, as bad as that can be, if nobody got killed and you don't have a big hole in your boat, it's going to be, and we sort of had concluded, you're going to have 1 of 4 results from that. It's going to be embarrassing. Amy was a little embarrassed about running aground. It's going to probably be expensive, and it may be inconvenient. But other than that, it really goes back to your perspective on your daily life and what's really important, what's a priority. It's not, you didn't lose one of your children or something like that. It's just, as Valerie would say, well, that's cruising, that's cruising.
It's part of the adventure.
It is.
I mean, it sounds almost cliche, but it literally, if you can have that mindset and perspective, then it's not a big deal. It's not as a big deal. The motion. Go ahead, Amy.
It took some time to adjust to that. I think in the first year we had the very much like, or something would break or we needed a part. Like right now we need, filters just to do regular engine maintenance, and we can't get filters here, or they have what we need and it's 10 times the cost of the States. So just those frustrations are what I would call like everyday frustrations. But we've really adjusted our attitude, after the first year to be like, okay, it's not an emergency, it's inconvenient, or it's expensive, or it's embarrassing, or all 3.
Yep.
That's why you're still doing it.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah.
I mean, if you didn't, because I know people that that adjustment doesn't happen, and if that adjustment doesn't happen, you won't last. You're done. Like you'll sell the boat and do something else because you cannot live doing this without that adjustment. And I think this is my own personal bias. I think it's a good adjustment, like to be able to adjust to deal with those. It's just dealing with the challenges of life, really, in a more volatile way. I think I've said that from the very beginning. Cruising is a series of ups and downs. They're just a lot bigger than they are in normal, isolated, protected Western civilization.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
most of it's not a big deal. It really isn't. And especially with our story, it's part of when I was at my sickest. I had really bad, violently ill, vomiting in my yard, and it was hours on end sometimes. And we sort of have this running joke. Well, at least I'm not puking in the yard. It's just like, this is nothing. This is no big deal.
Yeah.
But it's that whole perspective thing, Chris. It really makes
It is.
a huge difference. It makes a huge difference on having an appropriate perspective. And like I said, nobody's overboard. Shark didn't eat anybody. Whatever, it's fine.
Cool.
Like, just one more thing on that really quickly. So you had said like a lot of people don't adjust, and even in our first year, I've seen people buy and sell boats within a year. And I've also talked to a lot of people who have been doing this for quite a few years, and everybody says the same thing. First year is your hardest. Second year is way better, and third year is amazing. And I think part of that is that you've learned the boat, you've got a pretty good handle on your particular boat and the systems, how to provision, how to check in and out of countries, all the logistics of this completely different lifestyle, like you said. and you adjust your perspective and it gets better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you set better expectations, I think,
Mhm.
is as well, because I think that's a big part of it. I think a lot of people get into this and they have these unrealistic expectations as to what what they're going to accomplish in the first year, and B, how they're going to go about accomplishing it and how it's all going to look.
Yeah.
And it never works out.
Yeah. Chris, to that
It's,
point, just what you can accomplish even in a day,
yeah.
And I'll give you a quick example. So we don't have bicycles, we're not runners. So I have a little electric scooter that I get around on, and I put on my cooler backpack, and I'll go shopping if it's not really close. Like there's one store here that's really close, but I found where the locals go. It's 3 miles up the road. The prices are
Much better.
much better, but it's too far to walk. So I go up on the scooter, and the point to this is that it literally took me literally half a day to go to the meat market, to go to the grocery
Yeah.
store, get
Hardware
gas
store.
for the dinghy, and to get a case of beer for just for us kind of thing. And if you can't adjust to the fact that it's not Costco, then you're going to have a real hard time with this. But that same evening, we I got back to the boat. It was fine. I was tired. It was good exercise. And then we got to watch a spectacular sunset, and had I not spent half a day in a place that took a half a day, we would not have been able to see this spectacular sunset.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's sort of the trade-off and the adapting process, I think, that you're talking about, because that's a typical, that's Tuesday. If you want to provision, it might take you half a day to do that.
Yeah.
Or longer.
The inconvenience is having to run around to different stores to get what you need. He tried to run to the hardware store and they didn't have what he needed, and he tried what's supposed to be the chandlery and they didn't have what he needed.
What's supposed to be the chandlery?
Right.
I love that.
I went up to the marina.
It's like the UPS shipping center, and like a couple of they do propane, and it's like this all-in-one hardware store and everything. And so it was like, oh, they might have it, and you call and they don't answer or whatever. So it's like, forget it, we'll just go there. So yeah, it's a lot of, like Jack says, it's a lot of everyday hassles that we're just not used to having the conveniences of coming from, North America.
Yeah,
but,
for sure. For sure. I think
you can get out of that stuff too.
Yeah, you can. And I think it's like, I would say, for me, I don't know if you guys resonate with this, but it was like the decision to go cruising and then going cruising and this whole adaptation thing really expanded my idea or my perception of what's possible in life, and as far as how I live and the things that I experience. And I think it strengthened my ability to deal with discomfort around these type of things. It's like, oh, it's a half a day to go provision. Okay, you do that enough times and you're like, this isn't really that bad. And then and I think that was my experience of it. And then that's, for me, is translated into other stuff in my life now. And the way that I do everything in life is that you take that with you, I think, is what I guess what I'm getting at. I don't know if
Chris, to your point, I'm 62. I've been scuba diving since I was in my early 20s, so quite a while. And I recently took a free diving class. I never in my wildest dreams thought that I could hold my breath and swim down to 60 feet of water and not die, okay, and be able to hold my breath for more than a minute. Well, it takes some practice and a little training, and I'm pushing 3 minutes now, which at my age, I'm pretty proud of that. That's not, and I never in my wildest imagination, my son was even like, wow, Dad, that's pretty good. And he's 24, that's pretty badass, Dad, so that goes to what is possible, and we are capable of so much more than we ever think we are or give ourselves credit for. And it goes to my comment earlier. This is very doable for most people. It's just a matter of, do you have the tenaciousness or the dedication, and resources obviously go into it, but are you willing to bite the bullet and hang on long enough to get over the hump? And once you get over the hump, it's got its rewards without question.
Dude, that is so awesome on the freediving. I'm so stoked for you. I'm a massive freediving fan, and I've been all through that, so I totally get what you're saying. And that first time where you're like, whoa, I did this. That's so cool. So yeah, that's rad.
My first grouper last week on, with my nice new pole spear Amy just got me. So no, it was great.
Cool, man. Cool. That's super exciting. Um, One other question I've got around because we've talked a little bit about these challenges and kind of um, the friction, I suppose, that comes from getting over this hump. And how have you experienced that within the context of relationships, like relationships with each other, relationships with other people? How is, has that either, has it strengthened relationships? Has it caused problems in them? Have you lost relationships? How's that whole thing worked out for you guys?
It's done both. In our cases, there were days where, Amy, I hate your guts for doing this. I'm literally, get me off of this thing. I can't believe, and it wasn't her. It was, I agreed to it, but it was, this was your idea, and there were days literally where I called a broker back and like, Connor, what's our boat worth? Get me off of this thing. Seriously, I was hanging on the wall.
One day.
One,
Yeah.
but
What?
to
Okay,
the,
wait. What happened?
well, so we were in Plymouth, Massachusetts. We were, on a mooring ball, and I had lost my mind. It was, and part of it goes to the expectation. And like I said, I'd been fixing cars my whole life. So, and it goes to the balance of your day, of your week. And I'd been doing nothing. Just she and we were going up the East Coast, and all I was doing was fixing the bilge pump or doing this or doing that. And none of it was major catastrophic stuff, but it's a boat, and there's always, the list is always there. It never goes away of things that can be done.
Yep.
And I was just fed up with it one day and realized, this sucks. This really sucks. And I sort of lost my mind. I did. And, I didn't get to the point where I was kicking the dog, but I felt like it. I was really not in a good place. But what happened was, because on our boat, we have a leopard. So we have this front cockpit area, and we went out, and I was like, you know what? I just need to have a beer. I'm going to have a drink. And she got a drink, and we were just sitting down in the front. It was a nice warm breeze, wonderful evening. The stars were coming out. We were very close to a very high-end resort that had a really good band that was playing live music. I was looking at the Mayflower replica. I realized that we were in the same anchorage that the original Plymouth Americans had come to. And I just and I even turned to her, I said, you just dodged a bullet. You really just dodged a bullet. Because I had this moment where I realized that the cost of being able to have that experience was being on this boat, was dealing with the bilge pump, was dealing with having to find a place to get the dogs off, to get the dogs for a walk. And the dogs are a mix. They're great in some ways and they're a challenge in other ways. But it was literally, I sort of had this epiphanal moment where this sort of surreal moment happened right after I got off the phone with our broker telling him I wanted to sell the boat, and I just exhaled, took a swig of my beer, and just like, okay. And I looked around, I said, all right, this is pretty damn good, actually. And it was literally was a 15-minute turn from where I was ready to blow this boat up to where I realized I was having a moment that I could not have experienced any other way.
I think you nailed it. I think you nailed it in there where you said there's a cost. And that's, I think that to a large extent is the adjustment. It's adjusting to understanding the cost, not just, for the financial cost, the real cost of what it costs you to live that lifestyle. And then adjusting to I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that trade-off for what I'm getting out of it. And some people just don't get there, but some people do. If they, like you guys said, and you hit it, if you hang in long enough, you get there. The rewards outweigh the cost, because there is a cost. There's a very real cost.
And real quick on that, this also goes to the point that I made earlier about sort of that introspective examination of what's important to you, what's not important to you, what's your tolerance, what's it worth to you to listen to this really high-end band sitting in this place on an anchor ball in this beautiful environment. What's that worth to you versus the cost that it takes to get there.
And what do you need to be happy?
Right. And what do you personally need, Amy, what do you personally need to keep your soul in the right place, to keep your perspective in the right place? And it's different for everyone, but I've sort of come to the conclusion that I've had to do that examination pretty hard. Amy commented, I need more social interaction than just her and the dogs. Over a period of about 2 weeks, I start getting stir crazy. I need to go out and be around other people.
And that's what it was. It wasn't like any one catastrophic day. It wasn't the day that I drove us onto the rock or that we saw the damage when we got hauled out in Canada like a couple weeks later. It was just sort of the culmination of just hopping spot to spot. We had a lot of difficulty with finding somewhere that wasn't private property along the edge of the water where we could, take the dinghy to get the dogs off. We'd often just like pull into a marina and tie up quickly and try to take them for a walk, but we weren't staying at the marina. So I felt bad about doing that, but there was nowhere else to get into shore. And we really weren't interacting much with other people. We were seeing some pretty cool things, but we were also getting a little stir crazy, just being with each other 24/7. So it was sort of a culmination of that. And the other thing too is that, and Jeff and Valerie have commented on this, is you have to find what balance works for you as far as working on the boat and enjoying it and enjoying wherever you are, because they said they weren't good about that and they burned themselves out, because you could work on the boat all day long every day. If there's stuff that needs to get organized or gone through or maintenance or fix this or fix that or upgrade things. And, we have running lists of all kinds of stuff all the time. And like I said, some running lists of like things we need or want that we just can't get here. So maybe in the next place we can get it,
Yeah.
But our friend Sean, who's starting to do Blue Water Adventures too, he said 3 hours a day, my job is working on the boat. The rest of the day, they make a point to time slack tide and they go snorkel or dive or free dive or spearfish or go walk the beach or do something so that they make sure they get out and enjoy it every day. And it's easy to fall into the trap of just like staying on the boat like all day long and just working on it. And then the day gets away from you and you're like, oh geez, okay, well, we'll get off and do something tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah. I think to me, what I hear and what you're saying is it comes back to this again, expectation setting as to really answering the question, why, and that's back to the values of why are you doing this and what do you want out of it? And I think that I personally think not enough people spend enough time. I think people give it lip service. They're like, why? Oh, I want freedom or I want to do something different, instead of like, why? What do I need on a daily basis, Jack, to what you said, to serve me so that I'm filled up, so that I'm happy, so that I'm like, okay, I got what I want out of this lifestyle. And I think people forget that. And then they almost swap being a slave to the, the Western lifestyle of work to like, oh, now I'm a slave to my boat just because that's what they know. And it's instead of like, no, you have this incredible opportunity to create whatever you want in how you live this lifestyle. But it's easy to just fall into the like, oh, I'm just going to do what's needed and required because that's what I'm used to, and miss that. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah.
The thing to your point about people sort of paying lip service to it, and I'm sure you've heard the same thing, and it's sort of, part of it I will, put to the YouTubers of the world. Oh, you're living the dream. You're living the dream. And I immediately say, no, I'm not. Yeah. What I'm doing is I'm living just a completely different kind of life than what most Westerners are used to. There are moments of dreamlike experiences, chasing down a killer whale on a jet ski. That's, okay, who gets to do that? You don't.
And having the dolphins come
having the dolphins surfing the bow waves. That stuff is awesome. At the same time, there's the downsides. Running aground wasn't any fun, but it goes back to your comment about perspective. When we ran aground, I was not a happy guy. It's like, oh my God. But then I realized after we were able to get underway, I see this piece of what looked like a styrofoam cooler floating behind us, and I realized later it was half of
your rudder.
Okay,
when he said that, I'm like, no. He's like, I think that was part of the rudder.
We could still steer the boat. We still got around. The boat handled fine. We didn't have any water coming in. And after a little bit of time, and after we, got it hauled out in Canada and found out, okay, the extent of the damage, it was sort of this weird moment for me because on one hand, I was frustrated that we had to deal with it, but at the same time, may sound kind of corny, I felt blessed because we could deal with it. We dealt with it easily. We were blessed financially that we could cover the costs. It didn't end our marriage. Nobody got hurt. The dogs weren't in the water. We didn't have, the sea coming in. So I really felt sort of, I really did feel kind of blessed that, we just ran this thing aground and damaged it up. But, oh, well, we're carrying on the next day and we can deal with it and we can manage it. And we both did. And we had, all these positive effects come from that. from meeting these folks at the boatyard, getting more experience on how to deal with the boat and boatyards, which is an experience in and of itself.
That's a whole skill set.
That's a whole
living on a boat on land.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Whereas a lot of people would have just lost their mind over it and, oh my God, I'm done. We ran aground and we lost a rudder. Keith commented they lost half a rudder. Okay, well, we're going to get a new rudder fixed or get it repaired or whatever. You just roll with it and
they commented in their first year that they would have been like, holy cow, oh my God, this is an emergency. But he's like, the boat, so like he wouldn't have even known, and we wouldn't have either. The boat handled perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, he still hasn't fixed it.
Oh yeah. Getting that done at pads. Oh gosh.
No, still hasn't fixed it.
But it all goes back to that comment about perspective and where your priorities are and what's really important to you, and keeping that money in my checking account was not a priority to me. The fact that I was blessed enough to have the money in my checking account to take care of those and move on to the next adventure and to the next place was all a benefit, and now I know what it feels like to be woken up when you run aground.
I mean, it is a little cliche, but it's the old adage of like, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Really kind of is that, you get through it and you learn from it, you develop new great relationships out of it. And you've said a few times you've met people cruising, you met Jeff and Val, you had that first passage experience with them that are really great friends now. And I resonate with that completely. Like the people that I cruised with, we're still really great friends with. We all live all over the world in different places. Some of them are still cruising, some aren't. But we'll hop on a video call and have a chat with them, and it's like we were just together. And I think I've thought about that for a while, and I think it's because of this idea that I think humans develop very close connections under periods of stress. And so when you go through these stressful moments, because there is stressful moments, the relationships you develop are very strong, and in my experience remain strong, because the bonds you develop are so close. So which I think for me is one of the best byproducts of it, is the relationships that have come out of it for me. So
that's definitely one of our biggest pros in the last year is the friends that we've met that we're keeping in contact with. And sometimes our paths are crossing and they may not cross again for a couple of years, but I think we'll probably stay in contact, and we made some great friends. We're still in contact. Our good friends that we had before we started cruising, we still keep in regular contact. With the Starlink, we can talk to people or Zoom or WhatsApp or whatever, so we don't miss any phone calls or texts that we would normally be sending.
Yes. Starlink's amazing for that. I was just talking to Martin the other day about that, and it's like it's because when I started cruising there was no Starlink, and I finished right when Starlink was coming in. Like that was when I got into Bali, and Starlink is just getting into Indonesia now, and I'm out here now in the Caribbean, and I'm like, this is a completely different world. Like it is a complete game. It's unreal. It makes it so much more accessible. So much. I mean, we would have never been able to do this. What we're doing right now, we would never have been able to do this. And now we can do it. And it's
Starlink.
Yeah, I know. I'm on Starlink, you're on Starlink, and it's like unreal. It's amazing. It blows my mind. So,
it's been great for keeping the relationships up, and then we've made a lot of new friends that I think will probably be lifelong friends. And as Jack said, this has really strengthened. It's put us through some fire, but it's really strengthened our relationship too. And we've been together over 16 years, 17 years, something like that.
Cool. Chris, I wanted to make a point to a word you use about bonding. So stress causes bonding. When I was with Jeff and Valerie, we had a couple of moments, I'll put that very conservatively, a number of moments of stress. But because of that experience, I absolutely bonded with Jeff and Valerie. No question. I expect to be lifelong friends with the two of them. I love them both dearly, and we had some stress too. It was some pretty good stories out of that one, but we made it back. Nobody died. Nobody went in the water. It was back to that whole, quick story on that. I was there to help them with their engines, being the diesel car automotive guy and all that. And I was crawling down into one of the engine bays because we had problems with both engines at different times, sometimes simultaneously. At the time I was 60, and I'm crawling down in this engine bay, and I'm looking back, and I'm literally looking up the face of a 4-meter swell coming up behind us. And my head is, a foot off the water. And I was crawling down in this engine bay, literally thinking, what in the hell are you doing here? You are a fool. You dumbass. Oh, and then I got down in there, was doing what I was doing, and I stuck my head out, a few minutes later, and I saw another big swell coming up behind us, and I literally had this complete epiphanal moment of like, damn right, man, you're 60 years old. You're out on this boat. You're out with these people that I just met. Literally, I've known them a couple days, conquering the seas, overcoming my fears, overcoming these challenges. Damn, Skippy, you can do this. More power to me, and I really felt very, very, not to make it sound too corny, I felt very impressed with myself, and I don't normally feel like that, but because I was this 60-year-old guy, I didn't know Jeff and Valerie. We didn't know each other before I got to Puerto Rico to meet with them. I'm crawling down in this boat, having these engine troubles, and realizing that I can do this. I can do this, and I want to put that. The reason I brought that up is because there's a lot of people that may have that similar uneasiness of what the hell am I doing here, but it's probably a good thing that, unless you make some really crazy financial decisions and devastate yourself. But it was really it was this little microcosm of what this life is about, is that so much is about perspective, and that it is absolutely doable. And you can conquer Mount Everest, to make a metaphor of it. And you can have a wonderful life, and you will make friends. And you schedule it up appropriately, you will still see your family. You can still see the grandkids. You will have to give up some of your daily life experiences, because that's just a given. But the rewards on the other side, so far we haven't been able to measure them well, because we're still doing it, and it'll probably take 10 years after we're done doing this to really have a very good, solid perspective on what we accomplished, and the friends that I'm sure we will still have. Sean and Nicole would be similar folks that we met out here. I met Nicole at the boat show. We were looking at a Maverick, which they now own, and started chit-chatting with them. And we have become very great friends with them. They're fantastic people. They're great sailors. We've learned a ton from them. And we expect to be friends with them for as long as they'll keep us. It's really been a great experience. It has.
That's amazing. The one thing I got out of that story you just said about sitting in the engine room of that boat, and you were like, "Oh, I'm here." It's you in that moment. You were doing exactly what you said you wanted to do, which was living.
Exactly.
Like
right.
when
Very distinct way of putting that. Exactly right. I had life by the short hairs and was living it.
Yeah, but that's rad. And I think the other thing, you said this thing about the YouTube. People are like, "Oh, you're living the dream life." And it's never resonated with me either. This idea of, oh, you're living the dream, you're living whatever. I look at it like, I look at you guys, and I look at anybody out there doing it. I'm like, you're living your life.
Right.
That's all it is to me. You just have decided, okay, I'm going to go and do what I want, and I'm going to live life the way that I want. And I think that cruising is, and there's many other vehicles to do that, but cruising is one vehicle to do that. And I think that personally, I think it's the vehicle, but there are other ones.
It's just
but that's
the analogy I give a lot of people that ask me, so what's it like? And I use this analogy because I think it's not a bad one. It's like taking an inner city kid as an example from, because we live in the Chicago area, but taking a kid out of the South Side and dumping him on a cattle ranch out of like the Yellowstone series. You know what? Mm-hmm. It's just a completely different kind of life, completely different experiences. It's got its good, it's got its bad, it's got its challenges and rewards. And it's just a completely different kind of life. And for those that are considering it, you really, and when people ask me about it, and the folks that have come to visit us, the biggest thing I tell them is that if you're going to do this, you must commit to it fully. Don't whine about it, don't bitch about it, make your commitment. And actually, I'll be honest, I told her, you know what, you have till the end of this next season. I won't bitch about it. I'll be into this 100%. I made that commitment to her and mostly to myself. And once I did that, it started to change and get better and better. We still got our crappy days. The dog woke me up at 4 this morning, just because we got Rolly, and that's the one dog gets afraid. so that's not the most fun, not getting your sleep. But at the same time, once I made that commitment to her, it was better for us as a couple, and it was better for me and this journey that we're on. If
I
that
love
makes
that. I love that. I love that. I mean, that's the key. It's commitment. It's like it's the key to many things. It's the commitment. And what is the quote around that? I don't know if I'm going to remember this, but I'm going to paraphrase it. Somebody, it's a quote. It's from you guys. That quote. Do you know the quote? No, not the one. The 20 years Bowlines one.
The one that's downstairs.
Oh,
the setting the universe in motion.
Oh, it's actually from Goethe, the German philosopher. Goethe, that basically once you set things in motion, the universe will assist you in that endeavor. Is sort of the paraphrase it.
That's the but that's commitment,
Yep.
And it's once you commit, then the universe conspires to make it work for you.
Right.
Yeah, it's so part of it is the moment one definitively commits oneself, then providence moves too. All sorts of things occur to help one that would never have otherwise occurred. Whatever you can do or dream, you can begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Begin it now.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I love that.
And Jack's dad had that frame. That was when he passed away. That was one of the things he got from the house.
That was hanging in
my hallway. He's like, I want this. He's like, I want this somewhere on the boat. So we put it up.
Yeah. My father had that hanging in our hallway from the time I was young. That was about commitment.
Cool.
Yeah, I would say definitely try to, prepare as much as you can, make good decisions, do the coursework. We both honestly kind of blew off the psychology stuff at the beginning when we started it, because we're like, oh, we don't have all these fears. Like, we're not afraid of sharks and pirates and all the stuff that a lot of people are afraid of. I told Jack my fear is, somebody going overboard, lightning, or fire. Those are my fears, and those are still my fears. But we weren't really afraid, like, when we were ready to close on the boat, I wasn't afraid, like, to, go ahead with the final steps and stuff like that. Like, I know a lot of people have doubt sort of at the turning points in the process. And, we'd already sold our house. So that was already,
you were committed.
Back anyway. We were already committed.
We were homeless by then. It didn't matter.
But I think the psychology stuff is really important to really do your best to go through and be honest with yourself. Like you said, don't just pay lip service to it. I don't know how much you will really know until you actually go through it. Because like Jack really thought I'm pretty much an introvert. I had to deal with tons of people at work all day. It burns me out. I'll be happy to be on the boat with just you and the dogs. And then you realize, okay, so I'm not a complete introvert, and he actually needs more social interaction than I do even. And I would consider myself a very outgoing person. So I would say, try to do the best you can with the psychology modules and the relationship stuff. We thought, oh, we've already been together 15 years. Like, we're super solid. We've merged families with stepkids. We've moved, we built a house, we've gone through career changes, death of his parents, like anything you can name.
Mine near death.
Stress-wise, his near death.
Yeah.
We've gone through everything we could imagine as a couple, and this was still hard on our relationship, and we really have learned to communicate better from it. So
yeah, the comment about whatever status your relationship is, this amplifies it. If it's not great, it's not going to make it better. This will not, at least in my
and
experience.
If you yell at each other, you're going to yell at each other more.
Right.
Yeah. And all relationships, you're not just your relationship. If you're going with kids, it's the same thing. It's I've seen the exact same. Any relationship in your life, it just amplifies. Which Chris, and I want to reiterate because I can't stress it enough. It really goes back to that whole, how many are pointing back at you? It's more about you and your own assessment of yourself and how you manage stress, how you manage your kids, how you manage your partner, how you manage the chores on whether it's fixing the plumbing at your house versus fixing the plumbing on your boat. And that was one of the other big eye openers, and quite candidly, the toughest challenge for me, but also at this point seems to be the most rewarding, is that I've gotten more reality checks about who I am, what I am, how I am. And not all of them were comfortable. Not all of them were comfortable by any stretch. Some of them were
were very gratifying to reinforce. Oh yeah, I'm that way. I'm cool, right? And then other ways, you're an ass. Just like
Yeah.
it definitely amplifies everything as far as yourself and your relationships. And to any folks watching this, I can't stress enough, you really need to get a really hard reality check on who you are and what you're about as you're going down this road.
Yeah, and the sooner the better. The sooner you can try to start
Absolutely.
doing that, the easier it is, and the less sledgehammers to the face you're going to take, I think. Amazing pearls of wisdom that you guys have dropped in there. I think that's testament to the fact, or testament to one of the reasons you're still doing this is because you guys have picked this stuff up, and if you hadn't, you wouldn't be here. You'd be somewhere else for sure. So there's a lot of great stuff in there. And is there anything before we wrap up? I mean, you've dropped a lot of great stuff already. Anything else, like any kind of one thing that you'd want to leave people with when it comes, if let's say it's somebody that's listening to this that is thinking about it, they've got the dream. They've watched some YouTube because that's usually where people are at. They've watched a little bit of YouTube. Oh, that looks nice. I'd like to go out and, go cruising. What kind of advice would you give that person?
I would say definitely investigate it. Try to evaluate as best you can if you think it might work for you, and don't just have maybe someday I'll fill in the blank. Maybe someday I'll cruise. Maybe someday I'll learn Spanish. You may not have someday.
I would put it sort of a twofold. One, nothing worse than going 10 years down the road going, woulda, shoulda, coulda, I wish I had done that. And regretting that you didn't step up to try. That you just really, and what I mean by try, I mean back to the whole commitment thing, really giving it your best foot forward and really being diligent about trying to learn as much as you can, that whole thing. And the other part is, once you do step up to it, it's going to be hard. It's not, the learning curve is vertical, and it's not an easy thing to do. But once you do it and get sort of over the hump, you will look back in that 10-year thing going, damn right, that was one of the best decisions I ever made, was to do this. And everybody's experience will be different. That much is for certain. But don't have the regret of I didn't try. That would be the biggest thing that I would try to instill in people.
I love it. I love both those. I'll say on this, the regret thing. I've met and I've spoken with many people who have regretted not trying. As in the nature of the business that we're in, we get people all the time that we talk to that are in their late 60s, sometimes even earlier, that younger, and they can't do this anymore because of some sort of a medical reason, and there's regret. They're like, I wish that I had done that. I just can't do it now. I've never, to this day, I don't know if you guys have, I've yet to meet somebody that has tried this and regretted the decision to try. I'm still looking for that person. I know people that have tried it and got out and been like, that's not for me. But even they've said to me, I don't regret the decision to try it.
Right.
So I love that piece of advice that you shared, because I think it's, at least in my experience, it rings very, very true. So, yeah. Have you met anybody yet?
No.
Not that they regretted it.
One other thing I would comment, Chris, is that to people that are apprehensive or, and I was sort of that way, once you're currently the master of your universe and you're very comfortable with where you are and what you've been doing, and this is like going to the moon, this is a completely different circumstance and environment, unless you were raised with it, which most people aren't. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, because you're gonna. And sometimes you're going to hit the rocks and it's going to be 2 months in the boatyard, but big deal. Make the mistake, because if you do, almost invariably you will learn and grow from it as a person, as a couple,
and something good will come from it.
And almost always something good comes from the mistake, whether it's helping the next person by telling them the story to try to avoid the mistake, or just meeting new friends. Don't be afraid to make the mistake, because you're going to make a lot of them. But that's part of the personal growth process,
It makes you more humble.
Oh, absolutely.
Very, it's a very humbling process
Yeah.
to go start. It's a very, very humbling process.
Coming from established careers and, just having general life success, we had multiple homes, we had rental houses and things like that. And, we had done some pretty cool things in our lives up until that point. And moving on to the boat, I felt so incompetent just all the way around. I'm very much a beginner sailor, and some alarms going off and I can't even figure out what alarm's going off where and why. And, just the whole, probably the first 6 months I felt was just
sort of fumbling around in the dark is sort of how I was feeling, And it goes to her point. We were absolutely, for where we were at that time in our lives, we were the masters of our universe. We really were doing very well, very happy, very competent with what was going on financially. We raised 3 boys that are all doing well, all that kind of checked all the boxes. And then this completely elevated who we are in our life experience.
Amazing, guys. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to hop on and share a little bit about your stories, and to go into some, deeper, share some more personal stuff around, what got you to where you're at and the lessons learned along the way. I think it's not super often in this kind of niche, so to say, that we hear the other side, the behind the curtain side of what's, what really goes on to make these kind of dreams come true, in a sense, I'll put them in quotations, to make your life your life. From my standpoint, it's been a pleasure getting to know you guys a little bit, and I'm looking forward to getting to know you more. We're only 60 miles apart or something right now. It's but
I think you're 30.
That, right?
30 miles apart.
But our guests are coming tomorrow, so we got to wait until Friday to get out there. So.
Right. And hopefully we get to meet up, and I would love to go free diving with you, and see if we can get some fish or some lobster or something. And but thank you again for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us, Chris.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Well, that brings us to the end of this podcast. Thanks again, Amy and Jack, for hopping on. This has been the Bluewater Cruising podcast. You guys can tune in once a month. We release an episode where we talk about all things cruising, sometimes boats, sometimes stories like this. If you guys enjoyed it, please drop us a comment, what you thought in the comments down below. One thing you liked or loved, a piece of advice that maybe Amy and Jack shared that resonated with you. Would love to hear your guys' thoughts and feedback, and really looking forward to seeing you guys next month.